Go ahead and take this next caller. Caller, you live on the air. Please tell us your name, where you're calling from.
Shalom. This is Stan Embry in Alabama.
Welcome.
I have a question for Rabbi Singer. I've
Sure.
always wondered, we know that Daniel was a great prophet, but why, when they put the Hebrew Bible together in the order, the great Sanhedrin and everything, why did they not list Daniel with the prophets? Instead, they listed him with the writings of the prophets. I would appreciate the answer. Just always wondered about this.
Very
Thank
good.
you so much.
All right.
Shalom, shalom.
Shalom. Take care. All right, Rabbi. That's all yours.
Well, what a delightful question that is.
Right
And
on.
it's a very I like this man. I never met him, but he sounds wonderful. Thank you for the question. So the question is that Daniel was a giant of a prophet. Daniel was such a great prophet that in chapter 10 he was standing among other prophets, and there was a vision to behold, and only Daniel could see it, and other prophets could not. So, and God called him right there. He called him my beloved. No one else in Tanakh is called my beloved. It's a very high order of a prophet. So the question is then, why didn't he make it into the section of Tanakh called the prophets? And for those of you who are not sure what that means, so the Jewish scriptures is often called Tanakh. And Tanakh is really an acronym for three major sections. One is the Torah, and that's the 5 books of Moses. And then we have the Nun part, or the end part. So that stands for the Nevi'im, the prophets. And the last part is called, the third section is called the Ketuvim, or the writings. So people want to know, like, Daniel is in the section of the writings, and the question is why he couldn't make it into the prophet section. Why did the Anshe Knesset HaGedolah, that's the men of the Great Assembly, who organized Tanakh and really organized the book of Daniel? We did another show on Daniel's authorship a few weeks ago. Why didn't they think he was worthy enough to make it into the prophet section? Wasn't he a prophet? So as it turns out, the section of the prophets is not set aside, is not segregated for those who are prophets, whereas the writings are people who didn't quite make it into the prophet section, so they made it into like honorable mention, or they didn't get the gold, but they get the silver. So that's totally not correct at all. But rather the divisions are based on what the book is trying to do. And in fact, there are many people who authored both Svarim, both books, in the prophet section and in the writing section. Yirmiyahu Hanavi, Jeremiah the prophet, of blessed memory. He lived at the very end of the First Temple period. He prophesied for 41 years, from the time he was 15 till he was 56 years old. Could you imagine that? So he authored both Jeremiah and Kings, which are in the prophet section, but he also authored the book of Lamentations, which is in the writing section. So it has nothing to do where your book appears in the canon of the Jewish scriptures, has nothing to do with the person's prophethood or his ability to prophesy. That has nothing to do with any of that at all. The book of Ruth was written by the same person who wrote Samuel. It has nothing to do with who you are, but rather, what sort of book is this? What is this Sefer accomplishing in Tanakh? Now, all books of all Tanakh are the word of Hashem. That's number one. All books in Tanakh were inspired by Hashem to the greatest people who ever lived. Those are the prophets, there was no one as great as them, and they were therefore worthy of receiving prophecy. But their words were also nitnu l'dairos, which means that their prophecy was given for all generations. What Jeremiah said in his generation was as meaningful then when he preached it as today. A few weeks ago, when I was listening to the book of Lamentations called Eicha on the 9th day of the 5th month, Tisha B'Av. I heard it and I wept. Just, I'm sure, is the way Jews wept when they heard that Sefer, that book, read the very first time it was heard by others. Those words are eternal, they're forever, because they come from the mind of God, and these prophets wrote what Hashem inspired them to write. So what then is the distinction between the prophets, capital P, and writings, capital W? Because those are the names of sections. Now the 5 books of Moses, that's the instructions for life, which Moses, our teacher, Moshe Rabbeinu, Olav Hashem, of blessed memory, recorded exactly what the Almighty, blessed be his holy name, commanded him to write. He wrote whatever he was told. With the exception of the last 8 passages of the Torah, that was written by Joshua, his disciple. So the prophets are there as medication to tell you what you're doing wrong. The prophets were essentially oracular prophets, especially prophets like Isaiah, Ezekiel, Jeremiah, Zechariah. These were oracular prophets. They were providing oracles to the children of Israel, and they were speaking to them, and very often speaking to them with very sharp words. There isn't that much easy reading in the prophetic section of the Jewish scriptures. When I say easy, it's all there like iodine. I remember when I was a kid, so if you hurt your finger, if you injure, you got a cut. So my mother would put iodine on it, and it burnt like crazy. I think they probably still have it, I don't know. But it was I really gave her a hard time when I had to have iodine. But the iodine kept out infections and helped in the healing. So it was important. My mom didn't want to hurt me. She wanted to be healthy. But you needed iodine, and it was painful. There was a sharp pain when it was put on an open wound. And that's what the prophets are for. The prophets are speaking to the Jewish people, and they're telling them how to behave. And very frequently, they're admonishing the children of Israel that they're behaving very badly. And they also inform them that you guys have to rise up to be a light to the nations. And the gap between where you are and where you need to be is way too large. How are you going to fulfill your mandate as an Or LaGoyim, Isaiah 49:6, if you're acting and behaving in this way? So it's the prophets are the works in the prophets section of the Jewish scriptures called the prophets, capital P, okay, is telling the Jewish people to do tshuva and also reminding them of the Messianic age. That's why there's so much Messianic talk in the prophet part of the Jewish scriptures. And the discussion of Mashiach begins once King David is anointed. That's where you have explicit discussion of Mashiach until the Jewish people select a king. As the Torah, it was in this week's Parsha, once the Jewish people choose a king, they don't really choose the king, but they ask for a king, and then the Navi selects one for them. So, you have a king now? Now we can talk about Mashiach. We can talk about what is all coming. Now, my friends, we go to the book of Daniel. As it turns out, in the book of Daniel, there are no oracles where Daniel is speaking to the Jewish people. I know this comes as a shock to all of you who are lovers of Daniel. I adore the book of Daniel. I can't recall a day offhand in the last month that I didn't read from the book of Daniel. Daniel's way, way, way high up. He's a very great man. He was a great man. I don't want to get emotional. He's a very great man. He's a very holy man. You know, he was only 14 years old when he was brought to Babylon. He's a genius. And he was given such a high position in the court of Nebuchadnezzar, the Babylonian Empire, that would go to anybody's head. And then he was installed in the Persian Empire, and his faith was tested constantly, and he passed all the time. He was a very, very great person. But one thing is absent from the book of Daniel. There are almost no Jews in the book of Daniel. I know that sounds crazy, but aside from his companions, there are really no Jews in the book of Daniel, let alone Daniel talking to Jews. It's very, I don't mean to do this, but I'll do it. People say, oh, the New Testament's all full of Jews. It's Jews talking to Jews, a Jewish audience. There's nothing to do with anything. Question is it from God or not? Not if there are a lot of Jewish people in there. You can go to Wall Street, you can find many Jews. Doesn't mean that the New York Times is a Jewish place because it's all full of Jewish people. Listen very carefully. Daniel, the book of Daniel, it's very... the first 6 chapters are very easy to read. If you didn't read the first 6 chapters of Daniel, there's no excuse because it reads very easily. It's a simple narrative. It's written in the third person by the Great Assembly, and the last 6 chapters are written by Daniel. It's all in the first person. In the last 6 chapters, you're going to need a little help because you need to know what these visions mean. They're not difficult. Believe me, it's wonderful. But you need someone to hold your hand through that. But the key is Daniel is not sitting there excoriating the Jews. Look at Isaiah chapter 1, the opening chapter of Isaiah. What is it? It's a boom. It's like what happened there? Whoa, can't we ease into this book? Can't you give us a chapter or 2 of nice talking until we sort of build up? Isaiah doesn't waste time. Ezekiel, forget about it. If I told you what it says in Ezekiel, unless you read it, you guaranteed you would be shocked at some chapters in Ezekiel, where Ezekiel excoriates the Jews in a way that some people are stunned that he would use such language. For right now, take my word for it. Ezekiel is seeking to explain why the first temple had to be destroyed. Jeremiah's let me translate, is all castigation, virtually all of it, and messianic talk. So the reason why Daniel is not in the prophets section of the Jewish scriptures is not because Daniel wasn't worthy of it. It's not like a rating. If you're really good, you got it in here. If you're not so good, there. If you're pretty good, there. No, don't think that way. The purpose of the Torah is to instruct you. The purpose of the prophets that section is to criticize you and tell you what you could be and what you must rise up to be. And then the writings are telling you, well, how do I do it? What should I do? Should I go to Sedona, Arizona and hum and meditate all day? And I saw that with my eyes. If I didn't see it, I wouldn't believe it. Where they have all these New Agers there? No, you're wasting your time. And that's why the prophets, the writings are the last section. You should know the church doesn't like this at all. Why? The church doesn't want the writings section to be the antidote to the problems raised in the prophet section. Now, this didn't happen in the first century. This happens later. We actually see this at the end of the book of Luke. At the end of the book of Luke, it actually lists the order of the Jewish scriptures as the law, the prophets, and Psalms or writings. I think it's verse 44. So this later, see, why does a Christian Bible organize the books of the Jewish scriptures differently? Why do they move the writings, many of the writings, before the prophets? Why? You won't believe this. I'm going to tell you now, you wouldn't even believe me. Why would the church tamper with the order of Tanakh? And as I told you, at the end of Luke, it gives us the proper order, and the church will later, and it really, this order is adjusted, and end of 4th century, we have a major impact on how the church will order the Jewish scriptures. The reason is that they don't like the Jewish order. Why don't they like it? It's in the Gospels. Big problem. The church does not want the solution to the book of Kings to be the book of Psalms. The church doesn't want that. The church doesn't want that the book of Ecclesiastes should solve the problems raised in Jeremiah. It doesn't like that at all, not one bit. Why? Because the church wants Calvary to be the antidote. Doesn't want the book of Proverbs to be the antidote. So what it does is it switches them around. In the Jewish Bible, it means all the books, it'll say a Protestant Christian Bible, all the Hebrew, the books that's part of the Jewish canon are in a Protestant Bible. The Catholics have much more stuff in there. They have apocryphal works. Forget them. So, but the order is not the same. The reason is they want Matthew to be the solution. They don't want the book of Proverbs to be the solution. You get it? The antidote to sin has to be the cross, not the Jewish scriptures. That's why they disorder. So in short, do not gaze upon the order of the Jewish scriptures as a ranking. It's not at all a ranking. Now, it is true, one caveat here, because I have a smart audience and I'll get a lot of messages on this, that because Daniel's prophetic career began in Bavel, in Babylon, rather than in Eretz Yisrael like Yechezkel, Daniel receives prophecy through angels. Ezekiel's prophetic career, in contrast, began in the land of Israel, and therefore God would speak to him directly, whereas Daniel would receive prophecy through angels, as other prophets would as well. So really great question. Daniel is a favorite, but you don't have Daniel speaking to the Jewish people and telling them, thus shall you say, thus shall you not say. You don't even have him talking to Jewish people. It's a completely different type of work. Thank you for your question.